Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. It's 3 p.m. here in the UK and it's 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and you're all most welcome to join us here at 0 Days Live. Welcome back to our virtual studios, where today we'll be talking to industry analyst Fran Howarth from Bloor Research. Yesterday, you might remember, we spoke to Alan Jenkins, Chief Information Security Officer of Cylon, who shared with us his perspective of cybersecurity from a startup perspective and how designing security in from the start can actually lead to competitive advantage. If you didn't catch yesterday's show, it is available to download now, so please do. We also have plenty to come this week as well, including tomorrow, where we have authentication specialist and CEO of Veridium, James Stickland, joining us here in our virtual studios. Then on Thursday, we are lucky enough to be joined by very special guest, John Noble. He's non-executive director of NHS Digital, and he'll be speaking about digitally supporting the health service, which, as everyone will be aware, regardless of your industry type, is clearly of critical importance. Taking us into the weekend, we have industry commentator Clive Room of Pulse Conferences, where Dress Down Friday becomes 80s Day, so don't miss that. And as usual, I'll be in the chair to meet our range of great guests all this week. My name's Stuart Reed. I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. And as you may be familiar with Nominet being responsible for managing the .uk domain, which we've been doing for over 23 years now, we have something in the order of 15 million domains currently under management. And in addition to this, and building on our experience of domains and the DNS or domain name system, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise networks worldwide from cyber attacks, including providing service to the UK government's National Cybersecurity Centre. And ensuring people are able to be connected, included and secure is at the heart of what we do at Nominet. And with the unprecedented times we're living through together right now, digital communication is more important perhaps now than it ever was before. And with that in mind, we wanted to bring you an interactive show to bridge the gap left behind by the lack of physical meetings right now, and bring you 0 Days Live for everyone with an interest in or from within cybersecurity. Regulars of the show, of course, will already know that we're keeping it fairly simple here. We cover a lot of important subjects, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And we're creating an accessible community to bring people together, hear from others in the industry, get a roundup of what's going on in the news, share some thoughts on best practice, and of course, interject some good humor along the way. It's not possible, of course, without you, so thank you very much for joining us and getting involved. And if during today's show or any of the other live shows that you join, want to ask us a question or provide some comment or feedback, please do use the console on your screen and we'll read them out during the webcasts. And to make things really clear, we are absolutely live. We have set ourselves a task of providing you at least 40 live shows. Today is grand total number 15. And as we are live, that does mean that anything can, will, and for those of you who joined us previously, have witnessed things that do happen. And when they do, we'll hope you'll agree it's just one of those things. But we're not just live, we're also here for your convenience on demand too. Each and every show that we have that runs for about 30 minutes or so can be found at nominetcyber.com/0 Days Live, which is the same page that you signed up from. So it really couldn't be easier. Last week's burning question, you may remember, was what are you missing most from the office? With answers ranging from post-it notes to tea to office banter to food. This week, we're asking a slightly different burning question. What is the best purchase you've made since being at home? Now, yesterday, I had one that was my microphone so that you could hear me nice and loud and clear. Today, I have a different one. Mine's exercise related. I was very worried about my smartphone falling out of my pocket when I go out and about for a run as part of my permitted exercise. So I got myself one of these. It's ingenious. You simply pop your smartphone in here, you strap it to your arm when you go out, and away you go. And I'm very much looking forward to using it sometime. Steve, where are you and what are you doing today? Steve, where are you? Steve, it seems, might have had a bit of a better offer. So in the meantime, let's go to Kerry. Kerry, what have you
Hi,
been doing?
Stuart.
Hi
I see
there,
Steve
Steve.
has joined us as
Steve,
well.
you missed a chance. You're going to have to wait. I'm going to ask Kerry first. You can give us all your good excuses afterwards. And it's, if only to prove the point that we're live and that we're unscripted here. There we go, everyone. You can be under no illusion any longer. So, Kerry, what is it that's your best purchase since you've been at home?
Well, today, this actually arrived, and it's been something that I've been waiting for a little while. I ordered it a couple of weeks ago because, like everybody else who is now trapped at home, I've sort of focused attention on the house and on the garden. So I planted out a little veggie patch. The more's now sustainable when the lockdown's over, probably, but I've got tomatoes and beetroot and salad growing. But I had no way to water them. So I was using my little teapot, not quite as effective. So I've gone for industrial sized watering can.
Excellent. It's not quite as elegant perhaps as your teapot, but it looks like it's certainly going to do the job, and it looks like there's plenty of capacity there to water all of that fruit and veg. So good shout there, Kerry. Very good. And Steve, speaking of good shouts, welcome to the show this afternoon. Were you busy getting your special purchase ready for us?
Yeah, perhaps. I was having a few technical difficulties. As I said before, I was unsure about my network connection, and then all of a sudden, bam, it went out. So I had that weird struggle thinking, when I join, am I going to be just in time or just out of time? And clearly I was just out of time this time around.
You were, but you're here now, and that's the main thing.
Now.
So you're just in time to tell us, what is your best purchase since you've been at home?
So as I said yesterday, it's a fairly simple one. It is a mouse mat, but I think I may have underplayed it yesterday because I didn't just go for your average kind of mouse mat. I did go for an extra large one. I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a view of this mouse mat now. So it's a very big mouse mat. It goes along the whole desk, and it's got LED lighting. I don't know if you can see, it's changing the LED lighting around the outside as well. So I think I underplayed it yesterday. It is a super mouse mat.
I think you did underplay it because I've never seen a mouse mat quite like that before. It's more like a tablecloth.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, but hey, it does the job.
It certainly looks like it does, but it doesn't allow you to get here on time still. So maybe we need to give some thought to how we can rectify that for tomorrow's show. But never mind, you're here now, and that's the main thing. Speaking of being here now, of course, you all are at home, our studio audience. We'd like to hear from you as well. So what is it that is your best purchase since being at home? Do let us know on the console on the screen, and Kerry will be monitoring those and reading them out during the course of today's show. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we are lucky enough to be joined by a special guest today. We are joined by Fran Howarth from Bloor Research. So a very warm welcome to the show, Fran. Great to have you here. How are you?
Hello, Stuart. Thanks very much for inviting me on.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. It's great to have you here, and I'm also pleased to say that it was a seamless transition from me introducing you to the show to you appearing. So Steve could take some notes from that for tomorrow. But as you noticed just now, Fran, as I said, great to have you. Great to have you here. You can't keep away now, can you, Steve? Great to have you here, Fran. So I do appreciate you taking the time to join us. First things first, you've heard about our great purchases since we've been working from home. What's yours?
I'm sitting on it.
Brilliant.
What you need is a proper chair. I've been working at home for more than 2 decades now, and the most important thing is a proper chair.
Top tip. And it looks like it's a very ergonomic chair as well, so it looks very comfortable. Very nice. Very good. Excellent. So we've all made some really good purchases. So it's not been all bad. Now, moving on to the important subject of today, more important than what we've been buying since we've been at home. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your work at Bloor and really pick up on one of your recent reports that you've been working on. Now, in a recent report, you are looking at the challenge many organizations will be familiar with right now, which is getting experienced staff to deploy security technology to its full potential. Now, within the report, you suggest that perhaps managed detection and response services provide a way for organizations to bridge this gap. Could you elaborate on the problem that you've been seeing from an organizational perspective, and also how this network or managed detection and response solution can be a solution for people?
Well, detection and response is kind of top of mind for executives everywhere. And not just security, but it really goes right up to the C-level, because security risk is a business risk, and that is coming to the fore much more and more. But today's hackers and attackers, not just hackers really, they are much more sophisticated, and so the technology that you require in order to defend them against them, to find out if they're on your network and respond, is becoming increasingly complex, and it's really, really hard to learn and deploy. But at the same time as you need to deploy this, people are really finding that they haven't got the skilled resources that they need in-house. And what I've been seeing is that a lot of security vendors are now seeing their product sales to service revenues coming up to more like 50-50, where it used to be more product-led. And now they are having to provide the services on top that allow people to actually get the best out of the investments that they've made. Now, you could say that if they've got a problem with hiring skilled personnel, then why would a service provider not have those same problems as well? But they don't really, because they provide a much more interesting way of working. If you think if you're an analyst in a security operations center, then you may have a handful of cases you need to work on, and they may be fairly similar because you're in a particular environment. Whereas if you're working for a service provider providing managed detection and response services, you're going to be looking at like 300 or so cases a year, and this is really an exciting prospect for anyone.
Well, it's interesting because I was about to say that you kind of touch on a theme there, which is around the skills gap, which I alluded to at the top of this. And of course, the skills gap that we're facing from a cybersecurity perspective is pretty much well documented, and it seems to be that it's a global phenomena as well, in terms of being able to attract and retain the right skills within an organization from a security standpoint. And I guess you kind of answering the question a little bit to me there in terms of, is this an attractive way of being able to address that skills gap from a standard organizational perspective? Because it sounds like, you know, if you're able to focus those core skills in particular organizations like managed services or managed detection or detection and response services, then you're able as an organization to perhaps benefit from the economies of scale of those limited resources, but also get the wider benefits and effect of that kind of multitude of skilled resources that are in a particular organization.
Well, the skills gap cuts across organizations of all sizes, from the very small guys who've probably got 1 or 2 resources, not always focus on security, they're unlikely to have their own operations center, right up to the very, very largest enterprises that have staffed operations centers, but they really are looking for an extension of their team into the areas that they aren't able to do themselves. You've got a lot of things that come with threat detection and response, like threat hunting, offensive security. You actually go out and look for where you're vulnerable, and pair that with threat intelligence that comes from all over the place that you wouldn't have time to. And don't forget that when you look at these teams who are providing these services, many of them are spending 50 to 60% of their time just on this research that is way beyond the ability of in-house teams to do.
Yeah, and I guess what you're also saying there is that cybersecurity is complex in its own nature of things. There's lots of different elements of layers within cybersecurity, and having the skill set for all those different layers becomes a bit of a challenge. And it's interesting that the report that you conducted also referenced that the World Economic Forum believes that cyber attacks are the second biggest risk facing businesses right now. Do you think that business leaders are necessarily agreeing with that, and are they investing accordingly, more importantly?
Unfortunately, that report came out rather before the situation we find ourselves in now. So I think it's probably, although it is majorly important, and it is perhaps the biggest risk that your organisation faces if you take it along with compliance, I would say that things have slightly overtaken those statistics, and people are now trying to work out business continuity in this new era is a very big challenge that people are having to take seriously. And they're going to have to do it properly, not just snake oil that people are selling, but, you know, look actually at your entire business and perhaps start again.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the situation that we're finding ourselves in now, as we've said before, is unprecedented, and some of the digital ways of supporting those businesses are really much coming front and center now. And whilst we've covered in the show before that some organizations have been geared up, and as you said yourself, you've worked from home for a number of years now, other organizations just aren't prepared for it, and kind of the level of investment to support those businesses in these unprecedented times to make sure you've got, as you say, that business continuity but doing it securely, are perhaps becoming far more sharpened in people's minds right now. Do notice that our very own Steve Forbes has popped up on the screen once again, and again, regulars of the show will know that when Steve comes up on screen, normally, it means that he's got something insightful to say or ask. So, Steve.
Thanks. I'm not going to live this down, am I? Fran, I was really interested to hear, your comments there around the fact that the work environment is now changing. You know, we are now working from home more, mobile working. There's also been an acceleration in terms of moving to the cloud and hosting more services in the cloud. And I think, you know, recent events are only going to accelerate that even further. Do you think that the perception around security is changing with that shift as well? And is it keeping pace?
Well, I think that when we started looking at cloud, which was some time ago now, people just thought it's inherently insecure because you're giving things away to other people. But you're looking at a whole model where they are more likely to be more secure than the average organization because they have built it for so many clients, and they generally are following best practices, which they publish and you can see.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were discussing yesterday and last week even that the whole kind of balance between taking some of your services to the cloud and that balance with whose responsibility is it for the security of certain elements is a really important part to play there, because obviously you're hosting a lot of those things in the cloud and you're reliant on the security of those cloud vendors, but you've still got a big part to play in terms of securing some of the other aspects, you know, in terms of authentication and access and those kinds of things. So I think whilst that acceleration is certainly helping in some elements of security, there's definitely a balance there, and there needs to be an acceptance of that shared risk of accountability as well.
Well, you're absolutely right there. There's one risk that you cannot outsource, and that is data risk. It is still your data, and you can't put that on anyone else. They are not responsible for the security of your data. Encrypt it at rest, in transit, proper access control, pay special attention to privilege access management. Make sure you know what they're doing. And if you're not comfortable, then don't put it up in the cloud. Like, there's some companies that have been developing human resources databases for the past 20 years, and they just don't want to put those in the cloud because they weren't built with security in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very much a hybrid environment. It's not one size fits all.
Absolutely. And do you think that in light of the recent crisis and with budgets tightening even further, you know, as businesses find themselves with some challenges around their finances, do you think that MDR services will see an even further uptake? Do you think companies will look to MDR services to take some of that security risk on?
I think it's highly likely. This is a very new market. It's nascent. We haven't seen a level of maturity yet. I think that the whole thing about managed services has got a bit of a bad name in the past, and that they didn't really do anything that was too special. They just kept things running. This is a different paradigm. and that you're actually letting them in and helping you and giving you guidance is much, much more hands-on, and it's much more valuable. It may be a cost, yes, but you can't do that with in-house, so you're just going to have to rebalance your budget and realize that you know, no company's an island. You're going to need help, and I think it will take off rapidly.
So building on that point then, Fran, from what Steve said, I mean, clearly what we're seeing right now with the current COVID-19 crisis is kind of that rebalancing of budgets, and also rebalancing of focus on particular priorities right now. Taking that into account, and also kind of the wider narrative of your report around skill shortages and helping organizations prioritize things, this notion of a managed detection and response, or a detection and response capability generally, is that an approach that you'd be advising clients to take, regardless of whether they're strapped for cash or resources right now?
I don't think it's really just about cash. I think if you're looking to stop making investments, I think it's the wrong decision at this point, because the attackers are not going to stop investing. They're going to use the latest tools and techniques, and if they see you're down, then yeah, that's the way in for them. So I think it becomes even more imperative to get this right.
And I think actually that you raised a really, really valid point there, is that in terms of all of the challenges that organizations and individuals are facing right now, the attack surface continues to be there, and cyber criminals continue to be really active as well. So I think that's something that is worth keeping in mind. Kerry, I know that we're getting some comments and questions in from the audience. So you want to go ahead with some of those?
Yeah, sure, thank you. So we actually got a comment in from Alan, who was on the show yesterday. So business continuity should include resilience to cyber attacks, else businesses would be fighting the wrong battle. So what are your thoughts on that, Fran?
Can you just say it again, please? I kind of got lost in the middle.
Business continuity should include resilience to cyber attacks, else businesses would be fighting the wrong battle.
Well, yes, absolutely, because if you aren't resilient to cyber attacks, then you've got people who are on your network, you don't know what they're doing, you don't know how long they've been there. You have got to be able to prevent as much as you possibly can, but that's no longer enough, and that is why detection and response are so important. It's no longer that an antivirus is going to solve your problems for you. Active response, according to what the specific incident is. Like you're going to be doing a different response if it's ransomware to if it's a DDoS attack, for example. You must have all these playbooks, and you must understand how to defend against specific attacks, and that is really where you need the expertise.
Great, thank you. We have one from Andrew. How do you see network detection and response dovetailing with managed detection and response?
Well, I do see it. I see this market was originally shaped by sort of two factors. One was endpoint detection and response. That's where a lot of the vendors come from, because endpoints are such a vector of attack, and they're everywhere now. But they realized that just gathering the telemetry from endpoints is not enough. It's got to go to the network, because that is even more important. The endpoint is just a vector of attack, but the network is where all your data and everything important is. So I see them completely dovetailing, and I'm seeing a great extension out to network. It is the second phase of this, and it's exceptionally important.
Great. And when you're saying that service providers are offering a more varied environment, is there anything that you think organizations can do to counter that so they can get the right skills in-house? And that's from Harrison.
More varied environments. Yeah, well, you've got to understand, I mean, some people think of endpoints as laptops and mobiles only, but there's a great deal more these days. If you think of all the equipment that's in the average office, and then take it out to an industrial site and think of all the sensors, all the machines and equipment there are now being connected, medical devices. you've got to be able to gather telemetry from any single device or is connected to the network, every single part of the network, in order to gain visibility into what you've got, so that you can defend yourself against these attacks.
I think he was asking, is there anything that an organisation can do to make sure they get the skills in-house versus having to outsource?
Yeah, a lot of this is actually going to be retraining the staff you've already got, rather than just relying on hiring, because that's exceptionally difficult and even more difficult in these days. So it is important to look at what you've already got, see where you can redeploy, and yeah, where you can't, then take services.
And what's the difference between an MSSP and an MDR provider? And that's from Raj.
Well, an MSSP is traditionally looking after your IT infrastructure. They'll be monitoring your firewall, all that kind of stuff. But they then find a problem and they hand it off to you without any guidance. So an MDR provider goes way beyond this. It's a much more proactive service. And this is what the MSSPs have realized this, because especially with cloud, they are losing part of their revenues and part of, you know, what's interesting to people. So they're looking to be much more involved in their customers, and several of them are now taking MDR capabilities from other vendors in many cases, and they're building these into their offerings. So you will see convergence in the two. But at the moment, it's still MSSP for your grunt work and MDR for anything else that's really more of competitive importance.
And we've got another one in here actually about the skills gap. Is every organisation struggling with the skills gap, or does it typically become a problem in a certain type of role or industry? And that's from Joyce.
Well, I haven't heard any organisation say they've got all the resources that they want right now. And this is right from the very lowest to the top, especially in the mid-market. It's a problem that for too long, security has been seen as an IT problem, and they've left the IT team to deal with problems, where security takes a different mindset. And I think that a lot of people are struggling with that new mindset.
Mm-hmm. That's great, thank you.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for asking questions as well. It's clearly a subject that's resonating. So thank you very much for your time, Fran. It's fascinating to kind of get another perspective on some of the complexities within cybersecurity and the kind of the different layers that need to come together, and also ensuring how you bring those layers together, making the best use of the available resources, and of course in the light of what's going on right now, and also more generally where the skills gap is. So I appreciate your insights on that. Thank you very much. Kerry, we'll turn back to you to give us a quick wash up of some of the other news that we're seeing today as well.
Thanks, Stuart. GCHQ is calling on the public to report coronavirus related phishing emails, and that's according to The Guardian. And the BBC reports that the NCSE took down 2,000 online corona scams last month. In Info Security magazine, the NFL have expressed concerns over cybersecurity around the virtual draft on Thursday. Teams are worried that the sensitive information might be exposed to the competitors or criminals during the draft. The NFL have stated that their security measures are comprehensive and thoughtful. And ZDNet reports that Nintendo accounts have been hacked and used to buy Fortnite currency. It's unclear how the hackers are gaining access to the accounts, but some users have reported account breaches where they've used unique passwords. This suggests that hackers might be using something more than classic credential stuffing. Go.
Thank you, Kerry. And it looks like Steve is either inadvertently switched on his camera to join us again, or he's got something insightful, and I suspect it's something to do with video games.
It's not actually, it's the NFL. I think the Nintendo one is interesting, isn't it? That initially it was thought to be kind of credential stuffing, but now we've got people reporting that actually they were using unique passwords and that the turning on of multi-factor authentication is one part there, but they can't enforce everyone to do that, and I expect there'll be many users of the Nintendo system that are too young to think about how they do that and therefore put it on. But the NFL thing I think was really interesting for me, because we've talked about digital transformation and the acceleration of that, and that's, you can just see that's an industry there that's so used to doing things in the way they used to do things, and this whole kind of moving to virtual platforms and that kind of thing, you know, they're concerned around their IP and their secrets. When we're hosting things like our banking in the cloud, we're hosting our HR in the cloud, and yet you've got the NFL there that are really worried about people hacking into their systems. I think it's just an interesting insight into the world of sports and how they might have to change moving forward and how their perception will need to change.
Well, it just shows actually the different perspectives and the different priorities that certain industries have got when it comes to the kind of the whole digitization of things. It's also, the Nintendo story is interesting as well, because, you know, whilst the two-factor authentication is going to help secure those accounts, it's interesting to understand what else is actually going on with those hacked accounts as well. We see that they're looking to buy Fortnite currency. I wonder what else is at play there as well. Also, the other thing that I particularly noted in the wrap up of the news was around the coronavirus scams that we've spoken about a few times on this show. As many of you will know, Nominet works closely with the NCSC to fully support their efforts in eliminating these types of scams as well. So it's good to see that there's more proactive action being taken, and those numbers of the sites that they're taking down is pretty staggering actually. You may remember a couple of weeks ago we had Ali Bradley in here as well from our registry services and public benefit part, talking about how this is a really real issue and what we're doing to proactively address that as Nominet as well. So it's interesting that that's still kind of front of mind and is making the news, but also it looks like we're making some headway on it as well, which is good. So if you haven't caught up on that show where we spoke to Ellie, then that's also available on demand for us as well. So that is it for today. Thank you very much to our special guest today, Fran Howarth from Bloor Research. Good insight from her recent research, and it was good to get her perspective on how the market's moving, both at the time that she wrote the report and also how that also feeds into what we're seeing from a wider, more environmental impact of course, what we're experiencing from COVID-19. So that's all from today. Thank you again to Fran, to everyone else that's taken part in the show today. So everyone front of house, so Steve and Kerry, everyone that's behind the scenes making this as smooth and seamless as possible, and of course to all of you for tuning in. Don't forget, tomorrow we're going to be joined by James Stickland, who is CEO of Authentication Specialist Veridium. So until then, do take care and see you soon. Thanks then.